welcome to Digging into the Bible. My name is Jim Barnard. This is a production of Taylor Coaching. All right, well, we made it to the end of the Sermon on the Mount. It is day 18. I'm so happy to be with you. There's so much to cover today. I just don't want to delay. So let's go ahead and dig into Matthew chapter 7, starting at verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rains fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. I don't know if you noticed, but I was trying to slow down and accentuate a few verses here. The first one was the first verse. It was verse 21, specifically the second half of it, where it says, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Do you ever stop and think about the will of God? Sometimes it seems to me like the will of God is just something that kind of happens to me. Like winning the lottery or getting a snow day. These things are the will of God, and it's true to a certain extent, but, I think it's limited. Notice that Jesus isn't saying the one who lets the will of my Father happen to them, or the one who doesn't fight the will of my Father. He says the one that does the will of my Father. Verse 24 echoes this perfectly when it says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. He contrasts that in verse 26 when he says, and everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. Action seems to be really important to Jesus. As he's finishing this message, he's hammering this point of action, doing. I think Jesus is trying to squash passivity. Isn't it interesting that it says that Jesus came to fulfill the law? But so much of the Jewish law, there's 613 commandments in the Jewish law throughout the Old Testament. And of those 613, 365 of those are don't statements, like don't drink, don't smoke, and don't date girls that do. Those aren't actually in the Old Testament commandments, but they're don't statements, right? I'm trying to prove a point. Like they're passive statements of don't do something. Now, some people could argue those are statements about sacrifice, but still passivity is something that Jesus is attempting to get rid of. He is trying to instill and inspire action. In that story of building the house, the rain, the flood, the winds come. It happens to both of these men. They both kind of lost the lottery that day, but only one of them took real action. The wise man took the action of preparation, real, honest preparation to build a house upon the rock. And I know that this is just a story, but the truth remains. Wisdom comes from the action of hearing and doing. Let me say that again because it's important. Wisdom comes from the action of hearing and doing. Guys, this is so important. Once again, all of this rests on a focused relationship, which is readily available to us in the person, in our King, Jesus. Like we can have that relationship and be focused on him. This last little section ends with Jesus speaking with authority. If Jesus really has the authority of God, isn't it the least that we can do is to listen? It may just inspire us to action. I hope it does. with that, I'm on time, so let's wrap it up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, share it. Do whatever the professional podcasters say to do. I just appreciate being able to do this with you. Tomorrow we will start Matthew 8. I will see you then.